Hey, what's going on, everybody? Got Matt Baker here, college football reporter for the Tampa Bay Times, also an AP Top 25 voter. There's a lot to talk to about you about this Miami-Florida State game, but what's going on, Matt? Appreciate you joining me.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's get right into it. First off, just kind of what's at stake with both programs. You certainly got a landscape on where these teams are at. Miami comes in the game 4-4, 2-2 in the ACC. Florida State 5-3, 3-3 in the ACC. Game is 7:30 on Saturday. Hard Rock Stadium on ABC. Just kind of generalize why both teams need this win with where they're at right now.
Well, for starters, it's Florida State, Miami, right? Like, there's only so much we need to say about that. I covered the state as a whole with college football, and I covered a lot of Florida Georgia games, a lot of Florida State games, and Florida State Miami always delivers, and that's to me what makes it so special. And they've almost all, I've covered I think everyone but one since 2013. They've all been memorable. They've all been almost all of them have been exciting and really intense. So that's the first thing. It's freaking Florida State Miami. That's still a big deal in this state to the people down here. Secondly, from Miami's perspective, I think they just need a good win. Obviously, the season has not gone the way at least I expected with Mario Cristobal. I had them as a preseason top 20 team because you could see the talent and you knew what Cristobal had done in his past at Oregon. And looking around, I thought they were going to be the best team in the state, and clearly they haven't been. But beating Florida State, that would be a huge step forward in showing that things are going the right way, and just kind of a building block, especially in the recruiting trail and what have you. With Florida State, it's just more continued progress. FSU is not where they want to be. They're not where they expect to be. They're not good enough. But you can't watch the Noles and look year over year and not see the growth that they've made in Mike Norvell's 3 seasons. So beating Miami would be just another step for Florida State that, again, they are doing the right things, and the little things that have gone on behind the scenes for the last couple of years are now paying off, where you've got an explosive offense, you got a team that's fun to watch, and you've got a team that might win out the last 5 games of the season and have a chance to go into a pretty nice bowl, which would be a nice achievement for Norvell in year 3.
Yeah, so Florida State won last year's matchup 31-28, snapped a 4-game winning streak for Miami. Matt, you had an article, and maybe continuing on with what you're saying, an article about how their offense is built for playmakers. Can you expand more on that, and then also kind of give the viewers who have not had a chance to read that article yet, maybe just the numbers, what's at stake there, and then we're certainly going to get into some Miami stuff as well. But just starting with that point, with that dynamic offense they have.
Yeah, so I've got a story that we published on Tuesday on TampaBay.com about Norvell, like you said, his offense built for playmakers. And the backstory is when he got the job from Memphis, one of the first things he said is, we are going to be a program that's built for playmakers. And you look at what he did with the Tigers when he had really good running backs with Pollard and Gainwell and Henderson and some of those guys, and good receivers like Anthony Miller. He would use them in different ways, get the running backs out wide, put the receivers on jet sweeps and put them in the backfield. Just use them all over the field to exemplify and accentuate their specific strengths. And through the first 2 years at Florida State, I don't know that we saw a whole lot of that. There were bits and pieces, but not a lot. And this year, it's kind of exploded. They're one of the most explosive teams in the country, second in the country in terms of plays of at least 20 yards from scrimmage. They're 4th in explosive run plays, 4th in explosive punt returns, 9th in explosive pass plays, and they have a 93-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. That's a team that is doing it. And it's not like the Dalvin Cook era at Florida State, right? Where they had Dalvin and that was it. It's not like they were a couple years ago where they had Tamori and Terry and Cam Akers, and either of them could go for 90 on any given play, but they didn't have a whole lot else. I think they've got 9 or 10 guys that have a touchdown of at least 20 yards this year, including the quarterback, Jordan Travis, as a runner. So they could do it a bunch of different ways with a bunch of different people. And as I'm looking kind of big picture on where this program is, that to me is an encouraging sign that FSU is getting the playmakers and Norvell is learning how to use them so that next year this team maybe can make some real noise.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting and impressive numbers. Conversely, Miami, from their 20, 30, and 40-yard plays from scrimmage, they're in the hundreds. They're ranked in the hundreds. Florida State has doubled them up in the 20 category. And Miami's defense, they're actually last in 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80 against the pass, last in the conference in giving those plays up. So they've been vulnerable against big plays. So that will certainly be interesting, Matt. And one of the things I found interesting, Kevin Steele, Miami's defensive coordinator, he's not faced a Mike Norvell offense yet. And it's very rare to say that, because I feel like week in and week out, we're talking about how he's faced all these coaches in the past. And he said, that they do such a good job of masking what they do with different looks. And he's essentially not sure exactly what to expect from this offense. Obviously, it starts with Jordan Travis. Matt, what have you seen with Jordan? Just maybe the strides he's made. Obviously, a big game last year against Miami, but he's coming off one of these really impressive performances against Georgia Tech. But where is he different, and maybe where is he better this year?
Yeah, I think he's gone from being a pretty good to good quarterback last year to a really good quarterback this year. I mean, he's not in the Heisman discussion with Hendon Hooker and CJ Stroud and those guys. He's not at that level. But when you look at some of the guys in the next tier, I think he belongs there with what he does for that offense. He's a good slippery runner. He's not the fastest in the world, but he's quick and he can make the cuts. He doesn't have like Lamar Jackson breakaway speed or anything, but look, he's a very good, accomplished runner. And he's gotten better at knowing what to do with the ball in terms of the passing game as well, making good decisions, making accurate decisions, and just kind of understanding the offense and what's asked of him better. So I look at a quarterback that it's easy to kind of look at the size and, oh, this guy's not the best or whatever. He's a really good college quarterback, and that counts for something. Again, we always kind of view this through the NFL prism and first rounds and Heisman, but throw that out of it. He's a really good player, and he's really fun to watch, and he's made a lot of growth for FSU in his last couple of years, no question.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk like that, because I feel like we do that a lot down here in Miami. Essentially, there's only room for a few guys at the top and everyone else is terrible. And that's just not how it works. There's a lot of, you can be really good without being a first rounder, essentially, or even drafted. When we saw this last year at Miami with Charleston Rambo, set school records as a receiver and wasn't drafted. Certainly, they love to have him and his production. Let's get into this running game that Florida State has. It's going to be certainly a very interesting matchup. Miami comes in second in the conference against the run. However, they face the second leading team. Florida State leads the conference in running. They faced Duke recently, gave up 200 yards, so essentially right at the average. They didn't slow them down the way that they would like. Florida State, talk about their runners, essentially, because we know about what Jordan brings to the table, but they've got some other guys. And maybe your thoughts on Trayshawn, if you think he's going to get in there.
Yeah, Trayshawn Ward is kind of, I don't want to call it an unknown, but he's been banged up, missed some time, I think it was a shoulder issue. If he plays, he's a very talented player. He's from the Tampa area, went to Tampa Bay Tech High School, originally out of Plant City. He was a walk-on, and really just kind of one of those guys who bet on himself, thinks I can do this, I can make it, and it was awarded a scholarship and one of the better backs in the ACC. What impresses me though about the Florida State's run game as a whole is it's pretty multifaceted. Trayshawn Ward is not a do-it-all kind of guy, but he's got some size. He can run with power a little bit. Trey Benson is pretty electric in his own right. He's very quick. There were questions about him as well when he transferred in from Oregon, whether he was going to be, he had some injury issues in the past, and is he going to be that kind of high-end guy that he was in high school? When, by the way, the first guy who offered him a scholarship was Mike Norvell at Memphis. And then he has clicked. He had that 93-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. He is a big play on any given opportunity as well. And then the third part of that is Lawrence Toafili, another guy from my neck of the woods over in Pinellas Park. He was a blue chip guy that I think he originally committed to Willie Taggart and then stuck around and was a part of Norvell's first recruiting class. And he's really come on well this year, where there were flashes of it last year. He had a great catch against Clemson on the sideline where he did like this cartwheel thing and kept going. But he's really clicked here the last couple of weeks. When you look at him, he had a rush for a touchdown and had a receiving touchdown last week in the rout of Georgia Tech. So all three of them bring a little bit something different to the table. And then I guess the other thing I'd mentioned here that's important, the offensive line's a lot better. Florida State, going back to the end of the Willie Taggart era, or the end of the Jimbo Fisher era, their line was not good. Dalvin Cook, I don't know how he did what he did, given the line that he was playing behind. But the line has gotten steadily better and better and better, to the point now where they're at least average, maybe better than that. And that sounds like an insult, but they were historically bad a couple of years ago. So for them to get to the point where I think they're average in the country in tackles for loss allowed, and they're paving the way for a really good run game, that is huge growth for FSU, huge.
I definitely want to let's get into some defense stuff in a little bit with what Florida State's doing. But right now, I want to talk about Miami, Matt, because like you said, you cover the state. You're well aware. You had Miami 15th in your preseason top 25, as high as 12 going into that A&M game, and then obviously they lost, and you didn't have them in there. You've had Florida State in there at times. Just your perspective on Miami, what you're seeing, essentially what you got wrong, what we all got wrong with where this team is at, because they certainly have not delivered. And as you mentioned, that they're looking for a good win. They just haven't had that this year. I don't know if it's Virginia Tech or Southern Miss is their best win. Virginia, I guess, at 3-5. But your thoughts on Miami, maybe overall, your overall take on what's going on in Coral Gables.
Well, if you're talking about Southern Miss as one of the best wins for the University of Miami on November 1st, that's a problem, right? And Virginia is not good, and they got a new staff too. The Duke game was the one that really jumped out. And yes, I know it was a little bit fluky with the 8 turnovers, and that doesn't happen very often. I get it, but Duke's got a new staff too, and for Duke to go in and play the way they did, and obviously let's talk about Middle Tennessee as well. That was one of the most shocking games that I've seen. I couldn't watch that live, but just seeing the score, like, oh my gosh, what is happening? So what did we get wrong? I think part of it is Tyler Van Dyke. Obviously he's been banged up, so throw that out of the equation. But I saw him last year in the Florida State game. You look at what he did, where he was putting some stats that were comparable to Joe Burrow. And that's not something that that happens lightly. It doesn't happen by accident. And he was getting that first round buzz, and I think deserving of it. And he hasn't progressed. So why hasn't he progressed? Is it a situation where the coaching change didn't necessarily fit his strengths, learning from a new system, new terminology, that sort of thing? Maybe he wasn't as good as he looked last year, and he's kind of regressed to the mean. The situation around him with the offensive line and run game, there's a lot of factors there. But I bought into Miami early on in the preseason because they had an experienced quarterback that I thought very highly of, and that clearly hasn't worked out. And then the other factor in here is Mario Cristobal as a coach. Look, I was very high on him coming from Oregon. I cover the Gators a lot, and I told people, if Scott Strickland, the Gators AD, said, Matt, we're going to hire whoever you think we should hire. Who do you think? Mario Cristobal would have been the first name that I mentioned. But you go and you talk to people at Oregon, and there are some questions about his game management. Let's put it that way. And I think Mario is really good at the program building, pie in the sky, 30,000-foot view stuff. But when it comes to what do we call on 3rd and 7, what are we doing during the week to set us up for success in the red zone? All of that type of stuff is where there were questions when he was at Oregon, as well as quarterback development. And I think it's fair to say that those questions have kind of intensified this year. And so I think maybe I overvalued Cristobal as a coach on X's and O's on Saturdays a little bit more than I should have. So those are a couple of things that I got wrong. We'll do a full autopsy later.
Yeah, and it's not just you, Matt. I'm in the same boat, and what's interesting, and certainly I heard that talk as well. And I think what you're seeing, like you said, it's being magnified, and it's not just 1 or 2 losses here and there. And I think, this would just be a lot different. It would feel a lot different if the Middle Tennessee upset and the way that went, and the Duke loss. I mean, you take the losses. I mean, you can't win them all. I think everyone would understand the environment at A&M, and North Carolina is a good team. But those two stacking on top of it, they're gonna have to figure it out, and he's not doing anything to essentially silence that. And we'll see. They got 4 games left in November. They can finish strong, kind of surprise some people. Obviously, they're not expected to win this one, and we'll see if they can rally up and get it done and try to find some positive momentum, something positive with this season. Florida State's defense. Your thoughts on it? And obviously, they're coming off a good performance. It seems like, other than, early on in the year, I think it was NC State, they gave up some yards, but really, they've done a pretty good, or it was Louisville, they gave up some yards in that game, but just overall, it looks like it's been pretty good. Just your thoughts, and maybe its strengths, Florida State's defense, what they're doing well right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's a pretty solid unit. It's not an elite unit like Clemson was when I saw them a couple weeks ago, but it is certainly solid. I don't know that it has a whole lot of weaknesses. It's not loaded. It's not the deepest. And obviously they've had Fabian Levitt, one of their defensive linemen. He's been out for a bit and came back. So he was a piece that they were missing early on. One guy that I really like is Jared Verse, the pass rusher from Albany. He is somebody that, when I saw him in the spring game, he flashed. And as you keep watching him on the outside, he is somebody that continues to make plays and be disruptive. Tatum Bethune, the linebacker transfer from UCF, is somebody who's been a major get for them. And then Jamie Robinson at safety as well, a South Carolina transfer. So I guess as I'm kind of going through it, Norvell's done a really good job of hitting the portal and filling some of the needs on this defense to make it to the point where they can play pretty solid complementary ball.
Yeah, it is. And Verse was the guy that Miami fans would probably remember. Miami was certainly in the mix there, and a lot of schools were. He was certainly a good player to Albany there. Matt, just kind of wanted to leave you with this. Your thoughts on maybe this atmosphere. What you're expecting on Saturday night, Hard Rock Stadium. Like you said, neither team is exactly where they want to be going into this one, but certainly, like you said, it's Miami, Florida State. What are you expecting with the environment at Hard Rock there, national TV?
This is a bad answer, but I don't know what to expect. I've covered a lot of games, Florida State, Miami games down there in particular, and I think they've all been really great environments, except for 2020, which, throw that out. So my hope is that it will be another one of those, right? Where it doesn't matter what the records are. It's freaking Florida State, Miami, place is packed and it's rocking. My fear is that, Miami fans have, obviously unhappy with how things have gone and looking more at the recruiting rankings and what have you than the actual on-field stuff. So my fear is that it will be one of those bad environments in Hard Rock. Look, I think Hard Rock and the U kind of get a bad rap, honestly. A lot of rival fans make fun of the poor attendances, and that's a real thing. I was at the game against Clemson in 2015 where there was nobody there. I've seen Hard Rock when it's really bad. I've also seen Hard Rock when it is absolutely rocking. The Florida State, or excuse me, the Miami Notre Dame game in 2017. I don't know that that's the best environment I've ever been in, but it is on the short list, no question. So when it is rocking, it is absolutely rocking. And just about, again, off the top of my head, all the times I've been there for an FSU game, the environment has been great. And I certainly hope that's the case on Saturday, because look, I want to go have some fun. I'm excited. Let's go.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's not what it was at the Orange Bowl, those kind of environments, the teams, the high profile games. Obviously, I remember some big ones. My first one was that 0-3 one in the rain up in Tallahassee when Sean Taylor had the big one. Matt, your time is very valuable. I'll let you get going, but I appreciate you taking the time to talk here.
Sure. Thank you.